The Tory party are making themselves useful at last, and writing to Rachel Reeves. They're objecting to regulations that would force businesses to collect data on, you guessed it, diversity and inclusion, which will apparently cost the city up to £1 billion. Oh, God, make it stop. The Tories have got a nerve, though. They let this baloney run wild whilst they were in office. Unforgivable. But here we have it. Rachel seems to be prepared to continue with their legacy and effectively make it worse. Another bad decision from Rachel, although very much in keeping with her style. The new regulations, which have been drawn up by the FCA, that is the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Prudential Regulatory Authority, the PRA, will mean that companies will have to complete compulsory reporting of sex, gender, ethnicity, age, disability, religion and sexual orientation. Why? What have they got to do with the price of fish? Can the person do the job or not? That's what the bosses want to know, not whether you're straight, gay or something else. Who cares? In a world where we all want to be treated as equal, why should these things matter or even be relevant? In any case, most firms collect a lot of this information anyway, but why do you need to know what someone's sexual orientation is? And what makes Rachel think people will willingly give this information in the first instance? Complete overreach under the guise of diversity and inclusion. It's just not relevant and is segregating. And when you're segregating, you divide people further. It's just absurd. Andrew Griffith MP, Shadow Business and Trade Secretary, Mark Garnier MP, Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury, and Claire Coutinho MP, Shadow Women and Equalities Minister, have written to the Chancellor urging her to stop these regulations from coming into force. And in a letter, they stated that the proposed regulations would threaten British competitiveness, erode meritocracy in Britain, in British financial services, and embed scientifically unsound and contested ideological principles into regulations. They also pointed out that it would come at significant cost to the city, and to put all of this in place, it could cost about £1 billion. Now, a Treasury spokesperson said, economic reform is needed if we want to unlock the full growth potential of the British economy. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of all of this. Why can't we just treat everybody the same and stop highlighting differences? It makes no sense in a world where we're all supposedly equal. So let's get the thoughts of James Matthewson. He's a former Labour spokesperson. James Matthewson, welcome. So what do you think, James? You've heard what I think. What are your thoughts on it?
Yes, I certainly heard what you think, Nana. I couldn't avoid it. It's loud and clear, isn't it? And there'll be people who agree with you. Look, there will be, of course there is this vast political difference in our country, in our system at the moment. However, this is the party of opposition to the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, who, whether you like it or not, whatever the reason you think it happened, they were elected at the last general election, so now they are bringing in their values into government, and those values are rightfully the antithesis of conservatism and anybody to the right of politics, but they're trying to do it in a balanced way, to a point where people on the hard left aren't happy with them, people on the hard right aren't happy with them. That's probably the kind of ideal place for them to be at the moment.
But why does an employer need to know what your sexual orientation is? You know,
it's not about needing to know. It's about.
But why is it relevant then? Because I probably wouldn't tell someone. Why do they need to know? What's that got to do with whether I can add up, take away, or do the job, present a show, anything?
It's not about whether you can do the job. It's about that data protection.
Well, it is actually.
So that people can ensure. It's so that people can ensure that those jobs are not being withheld from people because of those identifiers, which
but you don't need
a regular thing that happens.
Okay, so nobody knows my sexual orientation. You can't tell by looking. You can't tell by anything. So why would that be relevant for me to put on a form to let my employer know, so that you're employing people who have a similar sexual orientation to me, when I probably wouldn't tell you, and I don't see you can't see it. So what's the point?
if you withhold that information, that's absolutely fine. It's your right to do so. But if you are open about your identity and your sexual orientation, talk about it, and are in a relationship with somebody, makes it unavoidable, then of course it's going to be known by people. If it's known by people, people who are prejudiced against those identities will use it against you. And
Well, if people
that's the
don't
reality of that
know my
situation.
sexuality, then they can't be prejudiced against it because they don't know.
Well, no, but
I'm
this
just
isn't
saying the
about.
point of this. Listen, the point that even you must admit that that is irrelevant. Why do I need to make sure I've got 10 gay people, 10 straight people, 10
It's not
bisexuals,
about
10? Why don't you just want people who can do the job?
It's not about that at all. It's about saying, if a company routinely doesn't employ gay people, why? When so many gay people have applied for X position and so many gay people have been turned down, why? It's about
But
collecting
maybe
that
they've
kind
not
of
got the
data.
job because they're not very good at it. Like
Well,
the people who've gone in who may be gay. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, look, what do you think at home? gbnews.com/you'll say. Do you need to know someone's sexual orientation to do a job? Is it relevant for somebody to be asked that question on a form so that we can all be diverse and inclusive? I mean, OK, I get it that you may think, oh, well, we need more black people or more this, but I think it leads to the very thing that they're trying to prevent, which is you end up with people getting annoyed that you've just employed them because they're black. And I, myself, am on the receiving end of a lot of that. Well, many years ago, well, not now, but at the beginning when I started at GB News, people would just say to me, oh, well, you've got the job because you're black and they need a black person. No, I've got the job because I'm good. Right? Right, well, we'll see if we can get James Mathewson back, but right now, let's move on. Rachel Reeves has been dubbed the Christmas Grinch after an analysis by the Mail revealed that her budget tax grab means that 45 pence of every pound donated to the charity will go to the government. In the meantime, ministers are accused of quietly pushing a green levy on businesses for packaging waste, set to raise household bills by up to 1.4 billion a year. Now, this grocery tax could add £56 to annual shopping bills as businesses passed the charge onto consumers. Well, joining me now is Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck. Right, Elliot, talk to me. 45 pence of a pound that you put into charity may go to the government. How is that?
Well, that's because of the significant increase in national insurance that has been levied on all organisations with the exception of those in the public sector. So they've added 1.2 percentage points onto the base rate, and they've also halved the point at which you have to pay it on an individual salary. And of course, individuals and the workers make up the bulk of the charity's costs. And so if you massively increase the taxes on those workers, you're going to lead to an enormous amount of tax being paid from the charity back into the public sector.
So how much was normally contributed in a pound to a charity before this?
Well, what's it gone up to from 45%?
Yes, what was it before?
I haven't seen that calculation. So, I mean, what we do know is 13.8% is what you used to pay on an employee's national insurance. From April, that's going to go up to 15%. It used to be the case that you paid national insurance above anything above £10,000. That's being halved to £5,000.
So a lot of people, I mean, what about this diversity drive? Because the city is saying that it could cost £1.6 billion.
Yeah, it's complete nonsense. And it's another example of the way that this Labour Party seems to be absolutely determined to hammer business in any way they can, from the national insurance rise to the changes to the minimum wage and the employment rights bill that will give employees day one rights rather than rights after 2 years, which is the normal way. They've kind of taken a 3, 4, 5, you can argue how many pronged assault on the UK's private sector, all to pay, I'm afraid, for the public sector.
Which aren't victims of the NI hike.
Exactly, they're shielded from it, so they're getting the additional money to fund. So it's very much one rule for them and one rule for everybody else. And so, once again, the public sector's shielded from it. They're already paid better, more annual leave, more sick leave. All the rest of it, there's not a single way in which they're not better off in the public sector, and yet they're being shielded from this damaging tax hike.
Wow. So what about the grocery tax? And now the idea is to push up and achieve the government net zero targets. What is it, and how is it that it affects consumers?
I have to say, so I have not seen this story, I'm afraid. No.
Because the £1.4 billion grocery tax, and basically ministers have been accused of quietly passing legislation which will add as much as £56 to household costs annually, which is shocking. In terms of the farmers, though, is there any likelihood that the government may turn back on this one? Yeah,
I do wonder if they're going to find a way to change this policy. It's been such a disaster. It's not going to really raise them any revenue, and it's causing an extraordinary amount of harm. I wouldn't be shocked if they find a way to perhaps lift the threshold at which you start paying it. So at the moment it's £1 million. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets increased potentially significantly. They need to find a way to U-turn on this, because for such little revenue raised, it's such a damaging policy.
And just your thoughts on this, because Rachel said that Nigel Farage hasn't got a clue on the economy. Do you think that some of the policies that Reform have put forward are a little bit pie in the sky?
Well, listen, the key thing with Reform is going into the last election, they knew they weren't going to get into government. So the policies they were announcing were, a set of values, a set of ideals. They weren't a serious, concrete policy agenda, because no one thought that they would get 326 seats. I mean, they got 5. I think that's a good result for them. I think the values that they espouse, which is a smaller state, lower taxes, more fiscal responsibility, are broadly good ones. They need to add a bit of meat onto the bones. But Nigel Farage is a man that has done very well, set up businesses, run businesses, and clearly has a much better understanding of the economy than Rachel Reeves.
I don't think there's anyone on the front bench that has actually run a business.
No, they have been involved in charities, though, and that same charity sector that they've been involved in, they've spent a lot of their career dedicated to, is now being hammered by their own tax rises. So I do wonder if Labour are looking at charities and thinking, is there some help we can be providing them?